Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting for April the 10th, 2023, and the time now is 7:03, and we will open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll call of council members present, please?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Paula?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallensack?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. Also present at tonight's meeting are Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Major, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Pora, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Commissioner of Recreation Tim Borton, and Finance Director Nick Roman. Council first order of business tonight will be to approve the meeting minutes for the March 27th, 2023 meeting.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to approve the minutes from March 27th, 2023 regular council meeting as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, the meeting minutes for March 27th, 2023 regular meeting have been approved. Council, since we did not have a committee of the whole meeting last week, we need a motion to add items 58 through 64, 2023.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, items 58 through 64, 2023 have been added to this week's agenda. We will begin with item 58, 2023, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Law Director Melissa Pora, and I will defer to Ms. Pora.
Mr. President, if I may jump in and talk about this.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
This ordinance transfers the former Fire Station 1 property to the OEDF. The goal is to attract an end user for the property, something that is of the highest and best use. The OEDF is currently marketing the property and seeing if they can find anybody for it. And if a suitable end user does come forward, they would need to come up with an offer and apply possibly for a zoning change. Right now it is zoned R1. So unless it's something other than R1, they'll still have to come to the Planning Commission and then before council. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Major. 5002.
5002 Seaman Road.
Ms. Pora, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just add that Mrs. Rawson has given everybody the quitclaim deed as part of the attachment. The legal description is also attached, just for everyone's reference. That was passed out. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Pora. Council, any other questions or comments on item 58? Hearing none, I will assign item 58 as ordinance 58, 2023, and ask Ms. Rawson to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the Oregon on the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation to allow the city to transfer land to the Oregon on the Bay Regional Economic Development Foundation to market for future development and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of ordinance 58 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll call vote, council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 58, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration, item 59, 2023 is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Major, and Finance Director Nick Roman. And I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to make supplemental appropriations and interfund transfers. I'm going to let Mr. Major talk a little bit more about what we are appropriating money for.
Very well, Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is basically the first quarter budget adjustments. And if you look at the very first fund, I'm going right off of the list here. There were a few options that were presented, and the options were presented based on what happened with the discussion that we just had about the Parks and Recreation building. So
Excuse me, Mr. Major. Do you know what option, because these were
Yes.
not distributed, so I can distribute them to the members?
option number 3.
Option number 3, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
So if you want me to proceed or
Oh, thank you.
wait till everybody gets their copy.
Okay. Hang on. Hang on.
I have one.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So now that everybody has a copy, the very first fund, the most important fund, the general fund, 101 has the appropriations for the police radio replacements, the police range parking lot pavement, the sign on DuPont for the police range, and the motorized entrance gate and proximity reader for the range, a rec utility vehicle, matching fundraising for the Historical Society. These are for the improvements that were discussed, I believe in February, along with all of these other items, and an increase to the caravan annual contribution, which was $5,000 per year. And then the last item is appropriation for interfund transfer to Fund 260, which is the capital fund. This would be funding for the streets building and the rec bathroom that was just discussed in the previous committee meeting. So in a total of $905,000 and some change. So the next item is the fire support vehicle. That's a replacement. Again, this was discussed in committee meetings, so I'm rehashing some of this for the record. But that's an $85,000 line item. And then you'll see a few of the funds here. I'm going to skip down to the 320 fund. That's $12,500 just to get this one out of the way. This is for the engineering office renovations. These were also discussed during our one of our finance and budget committee meetings. And the 260, 261, 340, and 630 funds all are related to the street department garage facility. So in total, it's about $1.7 million. So this would be the big ticket item, so to speak. And then also with that is the $230,000 that's in here for the additional need for the rec bathroom building. So those are the what all of these funds would be going towards. Again, it was discussed in the Finance and Budget Committee meeting, and I believe that was in February. Other than that, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Major. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing
Mr.
none.
President,
Mr. Drake?
this is for Mr. Major. Is the fire support vehicle that, is it going to be the pickup truck?
I'll have Clayton, Chief O'Brien answer that question.
Yes, Mr. Drake.
Mr. Drake, it'll actually be the vehicle that's out at station number 3, which is an old 2010 Tahoe that it'll replace.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 59, 2023 as ordinance 59, 2023, and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing and directing the finance director to make supplemental appropriations and interfund and intrafund transfers on an as-needed basis for fiscal year 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 59 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Ms. Ross, may you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 59, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration is item 60, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to submit a low-interest loan application to the Ohio EPA for our Oregon Waterline Replacement Program. This is on Seaman, Norden, and Wynn roads. The project consists of about 5 miles of 8-inch waterline replacement with some extensions to loop the distribution system. Specific locations are Seaman Road between Wynn and North Curtis Road, Norden between Corduroy and Wolf Creek, and then installing an additional 3,500 feet to connect Norden to Navarre and Loop It, which wasn't before. And then on Wynn Road between Seaman and Giverney Road, which is in Eden Park, and then another section is between Star and Wynn. And total project cost is $3.5 million. The city did obtain Ohio Public Works Commission funding, $450,000 grant, $450,000 0% loan, but the loan itself would be for around $2.6 million. A draft of the application is in Exhibit A. We are planning to start the project in September of this year, and it'd be completed in December of '24. And by far, this is probably one of the largest projects we've ever designed in-house. But very confident in that when I say that, but it is a big project. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Quick question for you, which is self-serving for me, kind of.
Yeah.
But that section of Wynn Road, would that be at the top of your list first? Because
Well,
how many breaks it had last year?
I can tell you, Mr. Zale, part of this is actually to run a separate line with our water distribution department to actually connect the dead ends of the roads in Park Place out. And we have to get 2 easements for that. We're working on that. But it was to do that ahead of the project.
Okay.
And then it'll be a lot easier replacing the line on Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any other questions or comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, I'm not sure if you've addressed this or not, but obviously it would go out for bid in next year's,
This year.
This
It'll go
year.
out to bid.
for construction next year.
It'll actually, the actual bid, I believe is in July. We'll award it in August. We have to submit it to the EPA for the final approval. But the construction would start in September. of
Okay,
this year.
just so our residents know that there's work that
Yep.
could be coming upon them quickly then.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 60, 2023 as ordinance 60, 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
An ordinance authorizing the city administrator to submit an application for water supply revolving loan account, WSRLA, funds available through the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, OEPA, Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, and authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into loan agreements with the OEPA for all such funds and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 60 of 2023 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paula. Thank you, Ms. Paula. Ms. Rawson, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 60, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration, item 61, is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian, Public Service Director Paul Roman, and Assistant Police Chief Ryan Spangler. Go to you, Mr. Roman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Well, again, the ordinance is to prohibit parking on both sides of Spartan Drive from Landorf Road to the dead end or the west terminus. The police department, as well as Mr. Schultz, had received complaints from the property owners in there, which even though it's their workers that are parking on the road, for them to prohibit that is very difficult. And they felt it would be best if the city could just make it no parking on Spartan Drive. There is room in the parking lots for their employees to park, and the property owners are asking us to make it no parking. And it's just, It's kind of odd from the very beginning when this road was first built, we never had anybody parking on the road. It was just assumed you couldn't. But officially there weren't signs and officially wasn't codified. And through the last couple of years, it's grown. You can see on the aerial on attached, you can see all the cars parking there. It's just grown to be a problem. So that's what it's about, and that's what they're asking for. And you know, most industrial roads really don't have parking on it. I don't know why it wasn't placed in the beginning, but I think it's appropriate to do it now.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Chief Spangler, you have anything to add?
The only thing I would say is the biggest complaint that we have is for the semi-truck traffic trying to get in and out of the business that is in there. And with vehicles being parked on both sides of the roadway, it's very hard for them to enter into the business and get back on Spartan Drive, as well as traveling down Mollendorf to make that turn onto Spartan Drive. We've been out there taking some photographs and actually looking at the parking. We even considered at one point restricting parking on one side, but it still didn't correct the problem of the semi-truck traffic coming in and out of the business to get out on Spartan Drive.
Thank you, sir. Council, any questions or comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. If this goes forward tonight and the mayor signs it, will we put temporary no parking signs up tomorrow? When does it start?
So it is being declared an emergency, and so it would be effective immediately. We have agreed with the business that we will provide them with something so that all of their employees are notified. We also, through the street department, will be putting up one of our traffic marquees or traffic signs, message boards on the side of the road to alert it even more that there's no parking there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Chief. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 61, 2023 as ordinance 61, 2023 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Amending Schedule 4 of Part 3, Traffic Code of the Codified Ordinances of Oregon, Ohio, to prohibit parking on both sides of Spartan Drive from Lollendorf Road to the west terminus and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula.
I move for passage of ordinance 61 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Ross, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 61, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration is item 62, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began, and I will defer to Chief Began.
Thank you, Mr. President. Over the last few years, we've partnered with Oregon City Schools to provide a school resource officer in all the elementary schools throughout the city, as well as Jerusalem Elementary, which is actually out in Jerusalem Township, but it's an Oregon City school, and we have that partnership. The officer who's out there is Jeff Costanzo. He's been working with the Jerusalem Township Fire Department and the school. They believe that there's a need to provide, they call them go buckets. They're essentially 5-gallon buckets full of medical supplies and different things in case of an emergency that they put in every classroom and every room that may house students, the gym, the cafeterias and all that. In case of emergency or a lockdown, they have supplies that they may need. So Officer Costanzo with the school had went to solicit donations to provide the medical supplies and other supplies for these go buckets. And through the Marathon Corporation, they actually have you apply for a grant for their donations. So he put in a grant request for $2,000 to provide the medical supplies through the grant portal, and he was awarded the $2,000. So this ordinance is just to accept the $2,000 grant donation from them and the terms of the grant, which just say that you can only spend the money on what you applied for, which is the medical supplies and other emergency preparedness supplies.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments? Mr. Wallenczak.
Yes, Mr. President, being that this is going to be implemented at Jerusalem, is there any talk of working with the other schools in the district and implementing it at those schools?
Mr. President. Yeah, there's been some conversations about it. We're starting out at Jerusalem Elementary with it. It was kind of their initiative. Officer Costanzo has kind of stepped up. This is his pet project, and It makes sense, especially with Jerusalem Township, that it's further out and further away from our emergency services, to at least start there, see how it goes, and consider moving on to the other schools within the district as well.
Thank you. If it works out there, I would strongly encourage us to implement that in all the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any other questions or comments regarding item 62? Hearing none, I will assign item 62, 2023 as ordinance 62, 2023, and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing and accepting the grant application to Marathon Community Investment Program submitted by the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 62 of 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Ms. Ross, will you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 62, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration is item 63, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Parks and Recreation and Parks Commissioner Tim Borton. And I will defer to Mr. Borton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance, we put out to bid the building of our new bathroom concession pavilion on the baseball side of our recreation complex. We did have 3 bidders, and Midwest Construction was the lowest best bid criteria. And if you recall, they're the company that just recently built the fire station on Wynn Road. So we're just moving forward with accepting their main bid to build that building here on the recreation complex.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any questions or comments? Although we did have a rather lengthy discussion on this today. Hearing none, I will assign item 63, 2023 as ordinance 63, 2023, and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Accepting the bid of Midwest Contracting, Inc., 1428 Alvin Road, Holland, Ohio, for furnishing labor, materials, and equipment for the base bid item for the Recreation Buildings 2023 project, authorizing the mayor, finance director, and commissioner of Recreation and Parks to enter into a contract with said contractor and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for passage of ordinance 63 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you. Ms. Rawson, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 63, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Last item for consideration this evening is item 64, 2023, which is also presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Recreation and Parks Director Commissioner Tim Borton. And once again, I will defer to Mr. Borton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Based on the past ordinance, this is just an ordinance for the Buer Group that they would oversee kind of the inspection of the building process as they go through the building and just the services they provide. They're the ones that designed the building, so this is just a follow-up of their services as the building is built.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 64, 2023 as ordinance 64, 2023, and ask Ms. Rawson to read into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and commissioner of Recreation and Parks to enter into agreement with the Bureau Group Architecture and Engineering, Inc., 314 Conant Street, Maumee, Ohio, to provide professional construction administration and inspection services Phase 2 for the Recreation Buildings 2023 project in an amount not to exceed $13,200 and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 64 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Rawson, take a roll call vote of council, please.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 64, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. This completes our agenda items for this evening, and we'll now move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, I have one thing before you that you got correspondence from in regards to the Civil Service Commission. And just to give a little history of the Civil Service Commission, I started here in 1989. Dick Garan, Judy Huffman, and I can't remember who the third person was then. Well, regardless, it seems like they stay as like a lifetime commitment because Dick Garan passed on. Dan Szewski was on there. Dan Szewski passed on. And most recently, Station Chief Ken DeWitt, after he retired from the fire department, served in a great capacity there, fit in really well, and Ken recently passed on. So with that, and you all do know Tina Evans somewhat, and she said, "Well, I was saying one day, well, we gotta fill that spot." She goes, "You know, I may be interested in that," and I thought it would be it's a great idea because they do a lot. And Tina knows what they do because she's had some association with, Sandy Garberick also is on that Civil Service Commission. And so it's got to be a group that works together well. They spend a lot of hours together. They not only create tests, they grade tests, they do a lot of things. And so they are quite dedicated. And Tina said she'd be up to that challenge and look forward to it. Ken DeWitt's term would end this year, and I thought that would be better to actually, if we were going to appoint Tina Evans to that, we would continue on with the next term, which are 6-year commitments. And so that's why you see this term, and I'm going to ask council's concurrence, the appointment of this Tina Evans of 2059 Lakeview Drive, Oregon, Ohio, to the Civil Service Commission. And the term would be the unexpired term from Ken DeWitt, which was 4/10/23 to 12/31/29. And I would ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Tina Evans.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I would like to concur with the mayor of the appointment of Tina Evans to Civil Service Commission effective April 10th, 2023.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any objections? Hearing none, Mr. Mayor, council does confirm with the appointment of Tina Evans.
I did recall that other name, Gary Breyer. Gary Breyer was on, but he moved out of town. So he didn't.
Grand too.
Huh?
Mr. Grand.
I said,
Oh, you did, okay.
yeah. But so Gary escaped without dying out of the Civil Service Commission, so. We hope that if you choose to leave, you choose that way. Although you don't have to leave town to not go on. And with that, I would conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Greg, we could offer to you in the future. We could, the next one opening, we could offer to you. I said the next opening we'd offer to you, but the people usually die in that position. So.
Mr. Major.
Nothing to report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pora. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick update. We had a very successful meeting this afternoon with our Parks and Recreation starting at 5:30. Mr. Borton, thank you for the update of our sports and non-bat and ball activities for our citizens. And I know we were searching at the beginning of this, appropriated the money for the restroom concession stand and then the press box and locker rooms, but the bid came in a lot higher than we thought. And I think it's great that we're doing the restroom and concession stand, but I don't, like I said in the meeting, we don't want to say no to the other. We're just looking for different avenues, trying to see what we can do to save some cost and get our foundation, with the sports teams, on the same page as we are and, moving forward. So, thank you. It was a great meeting. Everybody attended and it was, a lot of great conversation. I think, once Mr. Borton gets some final numbers on that, we'll try to have another meeting here, within the month to see if we can move forward a little bit or see if there's other avenues that we, can explore to, make that second part of our wish list or whatever, make it come to a conclusion so we can get, everybody on the same page. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Mr. Davish.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Paula.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder, Safety Committee meeting is set for Monday, April 24th at 6 o'clock. It's in regards to the need to hire 2 part-time civilian fire inspectors.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Mr. Horniak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, I need to set a public hearing, or 2 public hearings actually, for April the 24th at 7 PM. And the first one is for a renewal application for an agricultural district for Perry Buchanan III et al. For 39.012 acres located at 7050 Navarre Avenue. 57.146 acres located at 6701 Navarre Avenue. 39.012 acres located at 7150 Navarre Avenue. And 13.8 acres located at 381 South Norden Road. The second public hearing will be for a renewal application for an agricultural district for Janice R. Sheehan, trustee, for 32.1 acres located at 1225 Bury Road and 150.82 acres located at 6757 Brown Road. And that completes my report. We have a couple people or 3 people signed in to speak before council this evening. And Ruth Price, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My voice isn't good again tonight. It's not working very well. I wrote this in a letter because I was so,
Ruth Price.
oh, I'm sorry, Ruth Price, 5255 Seaman. I figured you all knew me well by now. This is about the zoning where you want to put in the mega gas station. The Oregon Zoning Board is currently considering making changes to the corner of Navarre and Isaac Streets. They couldn't just change the zoning, so it was submitted as a special use permit. This change has been submitted for putting an elaborate multi-purpose gas station next to St. Charles Hospital and across Isaac Street from where the town center is proposed. In the first block of Navarre, exiting off of I-280, going east into Oregon, there's a traffic light with a substantial amount of vehicles and semis. At the top of the overpass, there's another very short traffic light that turns red, making the left turn traffic backing up way to I-280. When that light turns green, traffic begins to move, coming to the corner of Wheeling and Navarre and another traffic light. At Isaac Street is where the emergency vehicle access to St. Charles Hospital is. And that's where the planning of the mega multi-purpose gas station is supposed to go. In that first short block coming off of I-280, there are 2 gas stations, a used car dealer, a Dunkin' Donut, a beauty shop, Star Diner, a Chinese restaurant, Walgreens, some residential homes, and 2 access streets from residential areas. In the second block of Navarre from Wheeling to Coy, there's a bank, St. Charles Hospital and Clinic, empty property where the restaurant was that's supposed to be redeveloped. We then have Arby's, Tom Hortons, the property that was Kmart eventually being developed into the town center, I'm assuming. We have a drug paraphernalia store, car sales business, strip of doctor's offices, car wash, large car dealership, Bob Evans, Wendy's, a residential home, Culver's Restaurant, McDonald's, another access street, Taco Bell, Chipotle's, Burger King, Sonic, 2 hotels, several strip stores with small businesses, 2 more restaurants, Kroger's with a gas station and a bake facility in their parking lot. Next to that, a bank, a gas station, auto parts store, Harbor Freight, another storefront that's empty, a Rite Aid, and a beauty shop. There are probably many that I haven't even been able to list. Because of the congestion, it's difficult getting from one side of Navarre to the other. Many accidents have happened when doing this, even though there's a turn lane. Instead of this mega all-purpose gas station you're supposed to approve, a better fit would be to the east of Coy in the Walmart area instead of adding more congestion to an already congested area. Another thing, putting this gas station next to St. Charles, there's a threat of fires, explosions, and the noise for the patients that's in the hospital. This would be a dangerous choice. This is a bad idea, and I can't even fathom you people considering it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. William? William Tucker? Greg, come on up, state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Greg Bonnell, live at 5401 Pickle Road. And I just have a concern in regard to a meeting that took place on April 1st at the public library. It was in regard to railroad safety, railroad issues with all that's happened in East Palestine, Ohio, and the real concerns that people have today. And my concern is that, to my knowledge, I might be wrong, to my knowledge, I don't believe there were any city officials at that meeting. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know, and I'll sit down. I just feel that it's a sad commentary on our community that a meeting of this importance that took place at our library, right in the center of Oregon, right in our city, and there wasn't any representation of, and I'm not really talking about council members, but some city administrators, whether it be one of the administrators, whether it be law director or city administrator or mayor or maybe even as far as emergency or the fire department or police department. I mean, to have some representation that, because I'm sure there were many of our citizens, I know many of our citizens were there. And I know you're all busy. I know it's a busy job that you have here. But I just think setting aside a schedule when these things come up, that somebody, take turns, it's your turn to go, set a schedule. So these type of meetings are covered. Because there were people at that meeting from all over Ohio. I mean, there were people from Bellevue, Fostoria, and Columbus. And I mean, we have people that come from so far away to take part in a meeting like this. I just think that our city officials should also be a part of that meeting.
Mr. President, and Greg, before you leave.
Mr. Mayor.
Just before you leave, I want to address that a little bit. Just as there are sometimes the refineries here post some meetings for the public to come to. We don't always attend, but we attend meetings privately with them as well as we do with the railroad. So it's not that we don't talk to them. We don't talk to them at those meetings. We have personal contacts, as Mr. Major just met with Norfolk Southern just recently. And so when we have issues, we talk directly with them through people that aren't just
That's
their
good.
PR people and representatives. So it's not that we're not meeting. It's not the best of forums for us to meet at that location, because when we're on a more a personal basis with them. So it's not that we're not there.
Right.
And
I
I can
understand
understand that maybe we should have some visibility there to look like we care, but we do care, and we are in communications with them over many issues. Our crossings all here, and Mr. Roman addresses them quite often too. So we're there. It's just that those aren't the best of places for us to get results.
And I understand, and
We're in a
I
different
know
forum.
their concerns are your concerns.
Yeah.
But I just think for our citizens and for the people that may have a question in regard to what goes on in our community, what goes on in Oregon, just to have somebody there to have some local input. And like you said, Mayor, the visibility of just to have one person that's representing the city, just to address any concerns that might come up.
We'll try to do
Thanks
that.
so much.
All right, thank you, Greg. Thank you. Counselor, no one else sworn or signed in to speak. I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Davish. Counselor, any objections? Hearing no objections, this meeting is adjourned.